Welcome to A Magical Life, Health, Wealth and Weight Loss. I'm your host, Magic Barclay, lead practitioner at Holistic Natural Health Australia and #1 best-selling author. In this podcast, I aim to give you practical tips on how to accelerate and sustain your health, increase your financial, spiritual and emotional wealth, and to look at something that haunts many of us needlessly, weight loss. In some episodes, I'll have guests available to give you even more tips, but in others, the floor is yours. Drop us a line at A Magical Life Podcast on Facebook and let me know what you would like to know more about. Now, sit back and enjoy, because it is time for you to create and truly discover a magical life. Welcome back to A Magical Life. I'm your host, Magic Barclay, and I'm again joined by Anne Hintz, who is an amazing woman who has overcome trauma in her teens and really tapped into who she is. And I use the word tapped in because she is a master in EFT. Welcome back, Anne.
Thank you. It's great to be here again.
Thanks for joining us. Now, in our last episode, you answered my standard questions, which you gave some great answers there. But we only really touched in a mention on this fantastic book you have, A Pathway to Insight. What can you tell us about what listeners will find in that book?
Okay, yeah, I wrote the book after I was able to put my awareness inside my body, because I wanted to write down the steps that I went through, because there's some weird things that the body goes through when it's releasing all this tension, and I didn't want to forget them all. So the first part of the book is how I believe we store the tension in our connective tissue, and how we are programmed in childhoods, and we just end up replaying the same things over and over again, the same feeling complexes over and over again. And I wanted to explain how I believe that's stored, and I believe it's stored in the connective tissue, because that's what I am putting my awareness in, and that's where I'm releasing the tension when I'm going on the inside. So that's the first part of the book. And then the second part is where I go into the steps that I took. So the first step was EFT. I wrote down all my childhood traumas, every emotional memory that I can think of, and I tap through them one at a time. And that's the first process. It's releasing the outer layers and starting to open up the subconscious mind. So I explain EFT in detail in there, and all the different things that you can tap on to start releasing this tension, releasing the burden that we've been carrying. And then after that, the next step was when I didn't really feel like I needed an EFT anymore, because at that point I was aware of the physical sensations underneath the emotions, not just the words, right? I could say, oh, I'm feeling afraid, but I could actually feel that tension inside my body that was that fear. And then I would hold my awareness on that. And now at a deeper level, it would release. So I explained that in detail in there as well. And then beyond that, then it is step 3 and 4, which is actually being able to hold the awareness inside the body. And I know it is the opening of the inner eye, the third eye, which is like kind of a woo-woo thing people hear about out there. I try and make it sound more physical. It's an actual thing. I explain how it releases its bonds. And yeah, that kind of goes into a little bit more spiritual work there. And then I also do have a chapter in there about someone who wants to manifest something. I know a lot of people like that aspect of this kind of work. And there's ways you can do it with EFT by releasing the resistance to what we have now. Because if there's something we want, it means we're not satisfied right now. And if there's something we want, we also have resistance to it, because otherwise we would already have it. So this chapter asks questions to bring up. There's also one section which is like an interview with me, which is actually fun to write, because I got to ask myself questions. So I have answers to those in there too.
I love that you interviewed yourself in your book. That's I mean, why not?
Right. Well, I knew people wouldn't ask me those questions, or maybe they would, but I wanted those in the book.
Terrific. Okay, so we've talked about your love for EFT. We've discussed the book. Let's find out a little bit more about how you've used EFT in your own life. So we know that you detached yourself from those emotions that were under the surface after finding your mum. How else has this really helped you throughout your life? So give some examples. I'm asking these questions now because some listeners will be listening to this going, well, that is woo-woo. Like, how can I not have one Tats Lotto because I really want it? What's holding me back? What am I not connecting to? So what sort of gains have you made in your life through doing this work?
Well, there's so many things that you can use EFT with. In fact, there are people out there that say use it on anything. But the first thing I did, because I wanted to know that it worked, I'd been to this doctor, he really helped me and I'd felt some relief, but I wasn't convinced at that point that it really did work. So I went home, I learned how to do it because it was available online for free, still is. And I had a 17-year-old cat at home that we'd been told needed daily saline shots. And I hated injections. I didn't know how I was going to do it. And the first time I gave him an injection, my hand was shaking so ridiculously much. I wasn't going to be able to do it every day. It just wasn't going to happen because I was too afraid of doing it. So I thought, I'll just try this out as a test case. So I tapped about my fear of giving the injection to my cat, my fear of hurting my cat, and my memories from injections because I'd had many. And the next day, the needle just slid right in. My hand wasn't shaking at all. All the fear had gone. So that's when I knew how powerful it was. And so that's when I started using it every day. I started noticing when I was feeling emotional and I would tap it out. And then I wrote down all these memories and I tapped all of them out for about an hour and a half each night until I'd gone through them all. And I found my mind becoming quiet. And I didn't even know this was possible. If you have a busy mind, I know people who've been meditating for 20 years and still have busy minds. And I didn't want to have to do that every day. So I wanted something that would really change. And my mind was becoming quiet. And I remember opening my kitchen door one day and just thinking, I feel like I'm living in a different reality because my mind was empty. Those words that I had been using over and over again, the ones that I judged myself with and criticized other people, those had been my dad's words that I had programmed in me in childhood and had just been replaying over and over again. But I couldn't see that until they were gone. And then I could look back and see, oh yeah, those were dad's words.
And I think a lot of us do that. Like, come on, listeners, we've all had that moment where we say something and we just go, oh my God, my parents just flew out of my mouth. And you really wonder, where did that word come from? Where did that phrase come from? It's not something that's a daily occurrence in your life. And it's because those emotions are trapped and attached to that phrase, that word, that facial expression, mannerism, anything. And all of a sudden it does pop up because you still have an attachment to that. And that's why it came through. And certainly I've used EFT to dismiss a whole lot of stuff from my parents. And it's quite freeing.
It is. And catching that voice in the mind, we have a voice that talks to us in our mind. Catching it kind of, once you do enough EFT, it becomes much more easy to notice. So that's what I would catch that voice. What am I saying to myself? And I would tap those words. I would tap about those words that I would hear in my mind. And that would remove them. It would release them from my nervous system. So then they wouldn't come up again.
Totally. Now, Anne, we do love freebies on this show. And, everyone loves to get something for nothing. So what can you offer the listeners to get them started on their EFT journey?
Well, there's a couple of things. So first off, you could go to Amazon.com and look up the book, A Pathway to Insight. And there's one of those things there that you can actually look inside the book and you can read the introduction. So that is part of my story, and that's on there, and you can read that anytime you want. And also, I do have videos on how to do some of these techniques on my YouTube channel. So you can go there and you can actually hear my story in a little bit more detail in some areas. So you can learn EFT there. There's actually a video on how to do EFT there. And in the notes, there's links to the videos of the person who developed the technique about 20 years or so ago. So hopefully some of those will help.
Terrific. Listeners, get onto it. As I said, I've used EFT and I use it with my clients. And yeah, it does sound woo-woo. I do have to tell you, when I first stumbled across it, I thought, what on earth is this? But it works. And amazingly, it is free and it is easy, as Anne said, and it just unlocks so much of your life. So definitely get onto that. Thank you, Anne, for all that amazing wisdom that you've shared, and certainly for those freebies.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and letting me share my story.
Absolute pleasure. Now, listeners, you can find Anne at annehintz.com, on Facebook at Anne Hintz Wisdom. As she said, she has a YouTube channel there. Jump onto Amazon, get your copy of A Pathway to Insight. Coming up in episode 129, we have Eileen Franco talking about transitioning from health chaos to radiant wellness. And that will be one to listen out for. Listeners, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us for these episodes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Terrific. Now, listeners, go forth and create your magical life. Thanks for listening today. Please subscribe to hear future episodes, leave a review, and share this podcast. You can follow us on Facebook at A Magical Life Podcast or at Holistic Natural Health Australia. That's holistic with a W. You can find us on Instagram at Holistic Natural Health or at www.holisticnaturalhealth.com.au. That's where you'll access all sorts of articles, freebies, and more.